Story, Powderfresh 86, Tease PT7. Introduction. In a world where trust is shattered and loyalties are tested, the aftermath of Kimmy's alleyway encounter with Wyatt, Beck, and Seth takes a dark turn. What was meant to be a one-sided confrontation has spiraled into something much more dangerous, setting the stage for an intricate game of cat and mouse. As the trio grapples with the consequences of their actions, a mysterious figure in the shadows begins to pull the strings. Unbeknownst to them, their lives are about to unravel, manipulated by someone who knows exactly what buttons to push. With the weight of their past decisions hanging over them, they must now confront not only their guilt but the consequences of crossing the wrong person. But there's one question that looms large. Who is really in control of this twisted game? What the fuck, Seth? You just left us out there with that crazy bitch. Wyatt yelled angrily as he applied a towel to his head wound. Beck moaned as he laid on his bed. I think she broke something, bro, he said, rubbing his chest as the side of his face swelled. Hey, screw you, man. I told you it was a bad idea to begin with. Don't drag me into your shit, Seth responded angrily as he handed Beck a cold drink from the mini fridge for his face. We've known each other for years. You're supposed to have our back, Wyatt griped. Not when you continue to do stupid shit. We're adults now, Wyatt. It's time to grow the fuck up. You two need to go to the doctor, Seth said, looking concerned at Wyatt's and Beck's condition. Damn, where did she train at, Cobra Kai? Beck moaned, pulling himself from his bed. Wyatt shot angry daggers at Seth, who assisted him from his desk chair. He snatched away angrily. The ping of his cell irritated him and he snatched it from the desk with blood-stained fingers. A message from an unknown sender. Wyatt opened the message to find a short video clip. His eyes widened as he pressed play. The 15-second clip showed him, Seth and Beck in the alleyway when they first confronted and attacked the girl. Her face was perfectly blurred, but theirs was clear enough for identification, plus there was sound. What the fuck, man? Who took this? Wyatt yelled out. Seth nervously cussed behind him as he watched the clip while Beck repeatedly asked what was wrong. Wyatt showed him the video clip. He sat back on his bed in shock. Dude, we're fucked, he said. Kimmy sat in her room with the door closed, staring at her reflection in her dresser mirror. She held an ice pack to her cheeks as instructed by Nana to reduce the bruising. Anger soared through her chest as she thought about the alleyway ambush earlier and the PTSD panic attack it led to in front of the girls. On top of that, she would have to put off the hunting session she had planned for the night. Kimmy grabbed a handful of her bedding angrily with her free hand. Suddenly, her phone pinged beside her. She lifted it up. It was a message from an unknown sender. She was cautious on opening things due to scammers. Her phone had an automatic scanning and spam protection for scam calls and messages, so one wasn't likely to get through. It wasn't impossible, but unlikely. She carefully opened the message to find a short video clip of her alleyway attack with 3 names and a dorm number. She dropped the ice pack as her hands shook violently. She watched the clip with her face blurred, but her attackers were shown clearly enough. She read the names Wyatt Scott, Beck Ryan, and Seth Asher, West Dorm Room 206 over and over. Kimmy started laughing hysterically. She laid back on her bed as a feeling of elation went through her, replacing the anger she was just feeling. She knew who they were and where they were. She would have to be extra careful as they were students, but she would stalk them over the next few weeks and wait for the right opportunity to act. Kimmy suddenly sat up and looked back at the video with a growing curiosity and nervousness. Who had taken the video? Why didn't they do anything if they were there? How did they get her number? Kimmy's heart rate increased as the questions raced through her mind. Someone's watching me, she said, narrowing her eyes. Darian smiled as he sat back in his desk chair. He had successfully sent the videos to the asshats and to his beautiful Kimmy. Now he would have some fun with Kimmy's attackers. He had done a bit more digging into who they were and their backgrounds. They were all well off, especially Wyatt Scott. They had a lot to lose. This was wonderful news to Darian. Those with a lot to lose were more desperate. Desperate people could be dangerous, but they could also be very stupid. The guys had already proven to be more aligned with the latter. The best part was that they all were there on sports scholarships. Darian laughed loudly, spinning in his chair. What should I destroy first? He whispered to himself happily. Wyatt's head pounded like a drum as he paced back and forth anxiously as blood dried on his head and face. Seth sat at the desk with his face in his hands as Beck sat blankly on his bed staring off into space. Who could have sent this? Wyatt mumbled. More importantly, why did they send it? What do they want? Seth interrupted. You're right, they didn't ask for anything and they didn't send it to the campus security or police. At least I don't think as we would know by now, right? Wyatt asked nervously. Maybe not, maybe we'll be arrested anytime now. Beck muttered sadly. Well, I didn't do shit. I left. This is on you too. Seth said nervously. Are you fucking kidding me right now? It shows all of us in that alleyway, asshole. If we get in trouble, so are you, because you were there and you knew what we were going to do. Wyatt responded coldly. Hey, she almost killed us. She also threatened us. It's not like she's innocent. Beck said, stuttering. It was self-defense, idiot. She could have shot you and been in the right. Seth responded coldly. I have to call my dad. Wyatt said anxiously. Are you joking? Beck said, jumping from his bed. He'll fix this. He can find who sent this and pay them off like he always does. Wyatt said, smiling. Yeah, then he's going to kick your ass and tell our parents, and our asses will be kicked too because of some idiotic plan you had. Seth responded angrily, rubbing his hand through his hair. It doesn't matter, does it? This needs to go away, like now. I'm calling him. Wyatt took a deep breath and begrudgingly dialed his father's number. His hand shook nervously as his father answered in his familiar stern voice. Seth and Beck watched anxiously as Wyatt explained the situation, changing some details to make them seem less guilty than what they were. Unknowingly, by pressing the video, Wyatt had downloaded Darian's spyware into his phone. Darian sat smiling at his desk as he listened and recorded the conversation between Wyatt and his father. His father cussed at him like a stranger after his distorted confession where Kimmy was painted as a Jezebel-esque seductress who purposely led him on and then publicly embarrassed him. To Darian's delight, his father asked for the video clip. Once he opened it, Darian would have access to his phone as well, maybe even his computer, as most people had them connected. Everything was going splendidly. Darian sat up as Wyatt's father promised to look into it and fix the situation. He threatened his son with harsh words and obscenities before abruptly hanging up. Darian smiled as his face became illuminated by his computer screen. He watched in excitement as his spyware successfully infiltrated Armand Scott's, Wyatt's father, phone. He scrolled through, finding some interesting information and the contact information to Seth and Beck's parents and their businesses. As the threads of deception tighten around Wyatt, Beck, and Seth, they find themselves caught in a web they can't escape. What they thought was a simple video message has turned into the opening move of a much larger, more dangerous game. Their every move is being watched, every mistake documented. But the real power lies in the hands of those who play from the shadows, manipulating their every step. The fear of exposure grows, but with each passing moment, the true enemy remains hidden, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. One thing is certain, nothing will be the same again. As they prepare for the storm to come, they'll have to reckon with the demons of their past and face the consequences of underestimating the quiet ones who never forget. Philosophizaboy. I think there's something wrong with my reflection. Introduction. In a house that once promised a fresh start, a woman grapples with a loss that consumes her every thought. What was supposed to be a refuge becomes a prison, and a place meant for solitude slowly turns into something far more sinister. As she seeks solace from her grief, she begins to sense a growing presence, an unnerving reflection that is no longer merely a part of her, but something more menacing. Whispers fill the air, echoes of the past that refuse to stay buried, and the lines between reality and nightmare begin to blur. What awaits her in the silence of the house? Will she find peace, or will she be swallowed whole by the darkness that now claims her home? This is a tale of grief, loss, and a haunting that may never let go. I don't have anyone else to talk to about this. I don't have any friends, family, or even acquaintances. When I ran away with Dan, I thought I was moving towards a better part of my life. I was going to be more grand, more promiscuous, and more exotic. But I can't. I arrived at the house just after dusk. It was smaller than I remembered, hunched beneath a sky the color of ash. The realtor had called it quaint, but now all I saw was decay. The paint, once white, peeled like dead skin, curling back from the wood in long, brittle strips. The windows were clouded with dirt, like they hadn't been touched in years. I wanted peace, solitude. But as I stood there, staring at the house, I felt the air grow heavy, pressing in on me. Grief does strange things to your mind, I thought. I hadn't been myself since Dan's accident. His death left a gaping hole inside me, and this place, this forsaken house, was supposed to be a refuge. A place to escape, to grieve in silence. But the longer I looked at it, the more I felt something was wrong. I shook off the feeling, telling myself it was just the exhaustion. I dragged my suitcase inside and shut the door, the echo of the slam too loud in the empty rooms. The house smelled like damp wood and old memories, stale and suffocating. I unpacked slowly, my hands numb, mind drifting. That first night, I slept fitfully, wrapped in Dan's old sweatshirt. The wind outside howled like a wild animal, scratching at the windows. I thought I heard footsteps in the hallway around midnight, slow, deliberate, but when I forced myself out of bed to check, there was nothing. Just silence, thick and oppressive. By morning, I convinced myself it had been a dream. Days bled into each other. I wandered the empty rooms, the floors creaking beneath my weight, each groan sounding like the house's whispering voice. Objects started disappearing, small things at first, a spoon, a pen, my keys. I brushed it off, telling myself I was just forgetful. Grief does that to you. I'd forget my own name if I didn't say it out loud sometimes. But the mirror, that was harder to ignore. It started with glances, catching the corner of my reflection when I wasn't looking for it. I'd be in the kitchen, washing dishes, and out of the corner of my eye, I'd see something move in the hall mirror. At first, I thought it was just my reflection, delayed somehow. But it wasn't. One night, as I passed the mirror, I saw her, me, standing there, staring back. Only she wasn't copying me. I froze, my heart thudding painfully in my chest. My reflection stood still, her face slack, eyes wide and dull. She was waiting. Watching. I reached a trembling hand toward the glass, but before I could touch it, she moved. Not a blink, not a shift in weight, just a sudden, violent jerk. Her hand shot up to the glass, slamming against it with a sickening thud. I screamed and stumbled back, but when I looked again, my reflection was normal. A terrified, pale version of myself. I backed away, avoiding the mirror for the rest of the night, every muscle in my body wound tight, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. Not yet. The next day, I started hearing the voice. It whispered, faint at first, almost like a breeze, but then it grew louder. Clearer. It was Dan. I was sure of it. His voice, soft and familiar, coming from the walls, the floors, the cracks in the wood. He was calling me, telling me he wasn't gone, that he was trapped here. With me. I wanted to believe it. God, I wanted it so badly. The grief in me ached, tearing at the seams. I spent hours sitting in the dark, listening for him, begging for more. But all I got were whispers, taunting, cruel. The voice turned from gentle to accusing, blaming me for his death, telling me I had abandoned him. You let me die, he hissed through the walls. You should be with me. Come back to me. I tried to shut it out, but it followed me from room to room. The objects that had disappeared started showing up in strange places, on the bed, in the fridge, inside my shoes. Things I didn't even own appeared in the house, an old pocket watch, a child's stuffed bear, a photograph of someone I didn't know, their eyes scratched out. The mirror was the worst. Every time I passed it, she was there. My reflection. But she wasn't me anymore. Her eyes followed me, tracking my movements. She smiled when I wasn't looking. A cold, mocking grin that stretched too wide. I tried covering the mirror with a sheet, but every time I left the room, the sheet would be on the floor when I returned, the glass gleaming as if nothing had been there at all. By now, I was hardly sleeping. The voice never stopped. My reflection never looked away. Then, last night, it happened. I woke to the sound of glass shattering. Heart racing, I sat up in bed, blinking in the dark. The mirror. I knew it before I even stepped into the hallway. I could feel it, like a heartbeat, pulsing in the walls. The mirror was broken, shards scattered across the floor. But in the middle of the glass stood a figure, tall and dark, shifting like a shadow made of flesh. It smiled at me, my reflection, no longer behind the glass but standing in my home, dripping with something dark and sticky. I tried to scream, but the sound lodged in my throat as she moved closer, her smile splitting her face in two, wide and grotesque. "Come with me," she whispered, her voice like shattered glass. "Come be with him." I ran, but the house twisted around me, the walls groaning as they stretched and warped. I could hear her behind me, her footsteps quick and sharp like the ticking of a clock. Closer, closer. Now I'm here, hiding in the attic, my back pressed against the cold wood. The whispers are louder, Dan's voice mingling with hers, calling me, telling me to give in, to join them. I don't know how much longer I can hold on. The door is creaking open. And the mirror is gone. I think she is too. Outro. The house, once a silent witness to the echoes of grief, now stands as a monument to something far darker. The woman's struggle to escape the past has led her to a place where the boundaries between the living and the dead have crumbled. As the whispers fade into nothingness and the house grows silent once more, it remains unclear whether she truly escaped or was consumed by the very forces she sought to outrun. The mirror is gone, but the haunting remains, lurking in the spaces between memory and madness. For some, there is no closure, no final goodbye, only an endless echo, trapped in a place where reflection and reality no longer make sense. Creepy__us. Be careful where you camp out in Australia. Intro. Scene opens with a dark, misty Australian landscape at dusk, trees swaying in the wind. Narrator, calm, yet suspenseful tone. Australia is known for its breathtaking landscapes, its untouched beauty. But beneath the surface, there are stories, hidden, unsettling legends that have haunted this land for centuries. I've traveled across this vast country, seen its wonders, and felt its secrets. But nothing could prepare me for what I encountered during one quiet night, tucked away by the waters of Wallaga Lake. A place that was far too peaceful to be anything but dangerous. Scene transitions to a camper van parked by the lake as the sun sets. Narrator, this is the story of my encounter with something ancient, something otherworldly. And the one warning I should have never ignored. Sound of a distant whisper as the screen fades to black. I've been pretty much all around Australia. Take my word for it, the best way to see this country is by car. There's just so many little hidden secrets and pockets of paradise you miss if you try to do it all by bus or train, or simply jetting between the major cities. My memories of road tripping Australia are for the most part positive. Sure, there's been some ups and downs along the way. But that's life, isn't it? You just keep pushing forward. And that's what I did. There's one notable stopover that still stands out though. An event which very nearly convinced me to pack in my adventurous spirit for good. I'll recount this as best I can. It was sometime around late September, a few years ago now, and I was headed from Mirage Bay up to Narooma. It's a gorgeous coastal drive for the most part, aside from a little detour inland as you pass Wallaga Lake. The best part of road tripping is the impulsivity, especially when you're driving a fully equipped camper van like me. You can pull in just about anywhere for a break, as long as the area you're pulling up at isn't illegal for camping and whatnot, and so I did, as I came around the bending roads of that beautiful lakeside drive. I found a picture-perfect spot to camp out for the night. Remote, peaceful, just the way I liked it. I set up my camp, got a hot pot of coffee going, and kicked back in the deck chair soaking up the sun. I got there right on sunset, so it was absolutely ideal. September can be a little warmer, but in the early mornings and creeping into the evenings that time of year, you won't find better weather down under. I was gazing out over those crystal clear blue waters, when I heard someone speak. Ungoran Annie. Needless to say, this startled me. There was no one around, well there certainly hadn't been a moment ago anyway. Ungoran Annie. Again. That same voice. That's when I realized, there was no one around. I was hearing the voice in my head. Bloody hell, I must be out of it, I thought. It had been a long drive. Ungoran Annie. Louder this time. And sending shockwaves through my head. Every time it spoke out, it was like the kick of a bass drum reverberating from the inside out of my brain. It hurt. And this is when shit got real bizarre. 3 kids came tearing out from the bush, breaking the tree line right behind my camper. They were shouting at me and pointing to the road, screaming, "Go! Go! Leave now!" These kids were clearly indigenous. Don't get the wrong idea, I don't mean some stereotypical image of indigenous Australian tribes living deep in the bush. They were just some local kids from a nearby camp. They sure seemed to know something I didn't though. And it didn't sound good. I decided I'd best heed their advice. This, coupled with that weird voice, was giving me a bad feeling. I packed up my stuff and scrambled back inside my camper. I strapped into the driver's seat, turned the engine over and flicked on the high beams. As I did so, the yellow beams of light shot straight into the dark bushland ahead, and illuminated something massive. It was huge. I shit you not, 12 feet at the bare minimum. It had an almost spider-like appearance, its arms and legs stuck straight out to the sides. Its face was pale white. I'm sure you're familiar with the Slender Man, right? The face on this thing was like him, but with a nasty scowl, his eyes beady and shimmering red. And its body, it was just like this shadowy, globby mass. In my head, the same voice from before, but it said nothing, just a low growl. Grrrr. The kids start bashing and kicking my camper now, but not like they meant me harm or anything, like they were urging me to leave. They screamed something out at me, a word I'll never forget. Dulagal. Dulagal, they shouted, over and over. Again, that voice from before, but much louder this time, echoed through my head. Ungoran Annie. I watched, as this thing slowly, yet deliberately, pivoted on its right foot, and then began walking sideways towards my car. No, really, it just kind of toppled from one stumpy leg to the other, blundering sideways toward my van. All the while, that pale white face was fixed on me, its angry expression contorting further and further as it got closer. That was it. I was out. I stepped on the pedal and floored it off down the highway. As I sped off down the road, I caught glimpses of this abomination in my rearview mirror, wobbling sideways, step by step down the highway, following my car. Thankfully, it did not appear capable of picking up the kind of speed necessary to close the gap, and I watched as it slowly disappeared into the darkness of the night. That was my first and last time to have ever witnessed anything in my travels I would call otherworldly. I did not need to look very far for answers as to what I bore witness to that dark September night. A simple search for a single word those kids shouted at me would turn up everything I needed to know. Dulagal. Straight out of Wikipedia. The dulagal is a large spider-like creature of Aboriginal dreamings. It is said to have bright red eyes, and it stalks Mount Gulaga. It is said that on dark nights, one might catch a glimpse of him, walking sideways across the plains. Where I was camped was a straight shot south from Mount Gulaga. So, it fits. Why this thing was down by the lakeside when he said to stalk the mountain, I don't know. Maybe he sees all this land surrounding the mountain as his territory. Maybe he was on the hunt. I don't know. This search did lead me to look into another phrase I heard that night. Those words which reverberated inside my mind over and over. This is of the Gunyandi language, and it loosely translates into please, go. What I can't figure out is whether this voice in my head was the dulagal or something else. A protector spirit perhaps. This illegal thing, it did not appear to have my best interests in mind. No, more than that, everything about its demeanor that night looked as though it meant me harm. The actions of the kids, too. They were frantically urging me to get out. Like they knew if I stayed there, something bad was gonna happen. If it weren't for them, maybe it would have. But nah, I don't reckon it was that Doolittle talking to me that night. He would have been quite happy to sneak right up on me. Still to this day, I can't shake the image of that awkward, sideways walk as he lumbered out from those trees. Outro. Scene fades to the image of the dark road stretching out into the distance, the camper van speeding away into the night. Narrator, somber, reflective tone. What I saw that night, what I heard, it wasn't just a trick of the mind. The Doolittle, or whatever it was, is out there. Watching. Waiting. I don't know why it chose me, or why it showed itself when it did. But one thing's for sure, there are places in this world, hidden in plain sight, where you should never linger, no matter how inviting they seem. And now, every time I drive through those remote, forgotten parts of Australia, I can't help but wonder, what else is out there, just beyond the trees? Scene lingers on a shadowy figure walking sideways, slowly disappearing into the darkness as the screen fades to black. Narrator, whispering, remember, some legends aren't just stories, they're warnings. Sound fades out as the screen cuts to black, with the words creepy_Oz appearing on the screen.